Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson, Chief Executive Officer of Input Output, and I wanted to talk about a few things today. In particular, I wanted to talk about our release process and the upcoming Cardano 1.2 release, and then a little bit of information about stake pools and delegation, as well as things like the Cardano CL testnet and so forth. I'm broadcasting live from Colorado. I just came back from my vacation from an undisclosed location. Yes, I went fishing, and I certainly did catch a few things, which was quite fun. And I finally had time for a shave and a haircut. Anyway, next week we hope to get out the Cardano 1.2 release. There's been a bit of confusion about dates and times and how these things work, and so I wanted to elaborate a little bit more about how our release process works. So, in April, we finished writing all of the code for Cardano 1.2. This includes paper wallets and activating the version 1 APIs, alongside a litany of little corrective things here and there, from performance improvements to security enhancements to network improvements and so forth. Once that was done, we turned it over to a part of the company called the Release Manager, led by a gal named Tatiana. And the Release Manager works with our QA director, Anatoly, as well as two external firms. One is called Allied Testing, and the other one's called Qvik. And these firms basically run that release that we're planning through a large collection of tests. These tests can constitute things like smoke tests, feature tests, as well as regression testing. Now, basically the idea is that it's like a funnel, and as you go through it, you get more and more assurance that the release is going to work for as many people as possible and not introduce new bugs or new problems, because we change quite a bit of code. So we went through 7 release candidates with the 1.2 release, and we're rapidly converging to the final form. And our hope is sometime next week to be able to release the 1.2 version of Cardano, as well as the update to Daedalus. This includes paper wallets, the V1 APIs, and a litany of other enhancements. So release notes are coming, and the release is imminent. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for waiting. This is quite a long release pipeline. A lot of things still need to be automated, and we need to make some improvements in that pipeline. So our hope is every time we do it, the release pipeline from when we stop active development to when we actually release the update to end users will shrink over time, and we'll get better and better. And every time we do a release, we do a post-mortem on it and try to find ways to improve and automate that process. Okay, so that's coming very soon. Thank you for your patience. You're going to like paper wallets a lot. I do, and I think it's a great feature, and I think there's a lot of other great things underneath the hood. It probably won't fix everything for every single user. In fact, we've made a lot of improvements to our QA pipeline and our testing and bug reporting pipeline, and we've received, I think, almost 8,000 support tickets since January, and we've been working real hard to filter them, categorize them, and be able to get a better sense of where people are having trouble with the product. And we're getting a greater mastery of that. And over time, I think it'll lead to considerable usability improvements. Unfortunately, software is software, so these things do take time. But know that we're working real hard, and definitely we have made a huge amount of progress relative to where we were just a few months ago. And we're getting to a point where we can actually better measure things and better estimate things, and we know exactly where we need to add more resources. Okay, so the other thing is the release of the Cardano CL testnet. This is the very first testnet we're going to release. It's the KEVM testnet. So this is the testnet that will ensure backwards compatibility with Ethereum. So basically what happened was that last year we worked with a firm called Runtime Verification, and RV wrote the first formal semantics of the Ethereum virtual machine. So they took the yellow paper and they took the reference C++ client, and methodically they were able to engineer a collection of formal semantics. And if you're interested in reading these semantics and learning more about K, you can Google Runtime Verification GitHub, and you can actually take a look at the KEVM semantics on their GitHub repository, as well as the README file there. The advantage of expressing formal semantics using the K framework is that you can then actually generate the entire virtual machine from the semantics itself. This is the first time this has ever been done in the cryptocurrency space, and actually it's seldom done in the regular development world for a variety of reasons, usually stemming from the difficulty of the task. So we decided, given that we feel smart contracts deserve to run in a high assurance setting, that it would be important to pursue this avenue. So this is the first time it's ever been done in the cryptocurrency space, and come next week, I believe March 28th, we're going to release the very first testnet. So this will be basically running backward compatible with Ethereum. So it'll be a command line client. The command line client will be able to deploy smart contracts to this testnet. In tandem with the release of the testnet will be a bunch of materials for people and documentation for people and feedback loops so that you can go ahead and write your Solidity code, deploy it, and take a look and see how that performs and what the network's like. It's not really a good test for performance, nor is it a good test for a full-featured testnet, although it's pretty powerful. It's based on our Mantis technology, which is quite mature. It's more of a test to see how the K framework works and give us a nice foundation so that we can iteratively improve K. We're working on with RV a lot of improvements, like a K to LLVM backend and things like semantic space compilation and so forth, as well as just general improvements to the K framework itself, which over time should dramatically improve performance and usability for people wishing to express their own languages and do cool and interesting things. The more interesting testnet, which is coming out in the coming months, hopefully July, but may slip a little, is the Yella testnet, which is our in-house virtual machine that we had developed specifically for Cardano based on LLVM, with a lot of really special things that have been baked in specifically for smart contracts, given the year of knowledge that RV has learned from the smart contract space. Like the KEVM, Yella will also be generated from the formal semantics, which is another first-in-class. And our hope is that people can play with the Yella language, and we'll also have a Solidity to Yella compiler, so you can write a Solidity program and either deploy it to the KEVM, or you can deploy it to Yella. So this is the first generation of our testnets, and over time we'll have more and cool and sexy things to talk about, and very specialized things specifically for Cardano, so look out for that. But these things are coming soon, so we should have an update for 1.2, and we should have that testnet coming within the next week. And that's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so last thing I'll mention is the incentives and delegation. So this has been an incredibly difficult research stream, and it's one that we took very seriously. So we put our best scientists on it, from Elias Kousoupas to Lars Brunjes to Agalos and others. And the end result of this has been the production of 2 papers. One paper specifically for the incentive scheme for Cardano, and one paper specifically for how delegation works with Cardano, including all the business requirements like cold staking and dealing with what happens when exchanges get your stake, so creating segregated addresses and so forth. So we plan on submitting the incentives paper to a conference in July, and we'll probably release it on ePrint around that period of time. And there's going to be a collection of 3 blog posts, along with some videos, released explaining what is the monetary policy of Cardano, meaning what should be the amount of ADA generated every year up to that cap of 45 billion, as well as dynamics about how decentralized the network ought to be, and things like the amount of stake pools and incentives for running stake pools and so forth. It's a very complicated topic, and so we're going to approach it very systematically and release a collection of blog posts, 3 of them, each one addressing something in kind. So things like how do we ensure Sybil resistance, what is the optimal level of decentralization for the system, and finally, what will the final monetary policy be for the launch. So we're rapidly converging to final parameterization, and look for that in the coming 2 months or so. And we'll basically announce that via blog posts and some video content as well. Shortly after that's been announced, we'll start working our way towards the Shelley testnet, which, thanks to the registration of stake pools, will be quite saturated. I think we've gotten over 2,000 applications for stake pools from people who are interested in helping us beta test and run their own pools. We have to kind of winnow that down so we have a reasonable set of people to work with. But throughout the summer and the fall, especially the back end of the fall, we'll be definitely working very closely with those people and getting everything completely smoothed out and cleaned up as we converge to releasing Shelley. So that's a bit about the incentives, and going on to delegation. We actually have a final scheme for delegation, and we're now at the point of specification. So if you're familiar with our wallet backend formal specification that we wrote, which is now available at Cardano Docs, we're approaching the problem in a similar aspect. So we have a white paper, and Philip Kant is now working at translating that white paper into a formal specification, which in turn we're going to be able to use to implement the delegation scheme. as this involves lots of cryptography, and this involves some discussions about changing the address structure and potentially changing some of the way our crypto works, in particular HD wallets. We have to approach it in a very systematic and rigorous way, and we've been doing that for the past few months. Like the incentives paper, eventually we'll release the delegation paper to ePrint, and we may submit that to a conference. It's more interesting from an engineering viewpoint than it is from a novel academic viewpoint, so it's still debatable whether we'll submit that part for peer review, as it's simply an engineering artifact, although it will go through some form of security audit as we get closer to the final system. So, delegation incentives have been definitely a bearable problem, and they've consumed a huge amount of mental energy over the last 5 months. We've certainly learned a lot, and we've done a lot of simulation and a lot of experiments, and we really look forward to turning that over eventually to the community and getting a lot of feedback from you guys, and hopefully being able to roll it all into Shelley as soon as possible and get the network completely decentralized. So one question we do get asked a lot is a question about the smart contract side of when will Shelley and Gokun be united. Well, there are a lot of challenges in that we also have to finalize our sidechain scheme to be able to send assets from Cardano SL to Cardano CL. We have converged to a sidechain solution that we feel pretty comfortable with, and we've gotten to the point where we've begun prototyping that solution and measuring things, for example, like proof size and transaction latency. So how long does it take for a transaction from SL to CL to settle, and what are some of the challenges of maintaining the state of multiple blockchains concurrently with Ouroboros? So these are ongoing and interesting questions, and they're ones throughout the summer we'll converge the solutions for, similar to how we've converged the solutions for both delegation and incentives. That, among a collection of other small problems, are required to be resolved prior to unifying Gokun and Shelley. But the good news is that the harder problem was to resolve the consensus issues and the incentive issues. So I don't imagine that this research stream is going to take an enormous amount of time. But it's something that we'll keep you guys updated on throughout the summer and throughout the fall as we get closer to that. Plutus is our other really interesting language that we've been developing, and it's our in-house smart contract language. We believe that smart contracts are intrinsically high assurance artifacts, and so that means that we have to think very carefully about how do you write good code that doesn't fail, so you don't have things like the parity hack or the DAO hack and the loss of hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's everything from how do you work with people who aren't necessarily technical, but they are domain experts like CPAs or lawyers who have lots of business requirements and an intent behind a contractual relationship between parties, who are able to model things like the parties, the flows of capital, the events and the conditions and times and so forth when things should happen. And how do you then translate that into actual code and verify that the intent matches the code that has been deployed? This is called the semantic gap. So we have a partial solution in that we've developed a financial DSL called Marlowe. This is the artifact from 2 years, of research that we've done in collaboration with professors from Kent University. And it's based on research that Microsoft Research did back in the turn of the century, in the late 90s, early 2000s, with Simon Peyton Jones from a paper called Adventures in Financial Engineering. So Marlowe is rapidly converging to a submission, and sometime during the summer we will finalize the design of Marlowe and submit that to a PL conference of reasonable prominence. And if you're interested, actually, we have a GitHub repository in the IOHK GitHubs that has a early version of Marlowe within it. But basically, Marlowe will be a financial DSL that people can use to model relationships, and these are machine understandable and can be executed in Plutus. Our primary smart contract programming language, however, that we'd like people to write smart contracts in, which also is based on the UTXO model instead of the accounts-based model, is called Plutus. And we've gone through 12 redesigns of that language since we started. And every time we do it, we learn a little bit more, and we try to simplify the language as we go along. We've converged to a point where we actually think we have a 1.0 design. And throughout this year, we'll continue to enhance Plutus and extend our UTXO model to be able to allow Plutus to operate properly. So Phil Wadler is the leader of that project, and sometime later this year, Phil will start releasing some dedicated content, including video content, explaining how Plutus works and why we chose the design decisions we chose. and eventually will allow Plutus to be interoperable with Yella and other frameworks. So we'll build some compilers for that, and eventually it'll run native, hopefully with an SL. Plutus actually has a nice roll-up in that Marlow can be embedded within Plutus, and Plutus can be embedded within Haskell. So we have this nice two-phase model where some of the code can run on the client side and some of the code can run on the blockchain. And hopefully we can even have a meaningful discussion about what formal verification looks like given Plutus. So look for some updates on that throughout the summer. But it's a really exciting work stream, and it's something we think is going to add a lot of value to the space. So we kind of have a nice blend of principles and pragmatism. If you want legacy interoperability, you can use the KVM and the languages you've come to know and love, like Solidity, and future languages like Viper will be backward compatible with that. If you want to see the best and greatest on the VM side, Yella is really an amazing piece of engineering, and there should be a paper submitted sometime in July formalizing Yella, and that will probably go up on ePrint. So you can kind of see what we've been able to come up with in partnership with RV and really explore the power of the K framework. And if you're very principled and you want to write high assurance code, you'll have the Plutus option. So as these things start going from the lab into implementation, eventually they'll be pulled into the Goguen project, and eventually we'll be able to pull Goguen into Shelley via sidechains, and the whole system will come together. And at that point, we should be a completely decentralized, really wonderful system with smart contract capability that's on par and better than what Ethereum has to offer. Faster, safer, and cheaper to operate. So looking beyond that, there are really two final work streams that we are going to be investing and have already begun investing a lot of resources into. One of them is the governance and sustainability side of Cardano. So you may have noticed recently that we just published our treasury paper to ePrint. It's a major accomplishment that comes from over a year of research that we've done, and we've already gotten expressed interest from Zencash and are in discussions with other cryptocurrencies to implement or assist in the implementation of our treasury scheme or a lightweight version of the treasury scheme for their own use. So our hope is that this treasury system can be used in many cryptocurrencies, as it does add a lot of self-sustainability into the ecosystem. So if you're really curious on how that system works, we have a video from Bing Cheng, the project leader there, on YouTube in our the IOHK YouTube channel, and we also have published a paper to ePrint. Although the paper is very technical, it does capture most of the reasons why we pursued that. So that research line needs another 4 papers, we think, and we'll be pursuing those over the next year. And at the end of that research stream, we should be able to begin implementation of that treasury system into Cardano at a very deep level. The other side is the scalability research, and we've begun work on Ouroboros Hydra, and we should, now that Ouroboros Genesis is done and it just needs a little bit of polishing, begin that research stream. And that's where we're going to get true sharding and true scalability in the system. So the other side of this is the network side of things, and we have really started getting into the meat and potatoes of RENA, and we've been thinking deeply about what's the best way of pursuing RENA. We estimate that RENA, the way that we'd like to construct it, contains about 600 man-months of engineering time. It's equivalent to basically building a second internet in terms of complexity of engineering. So we're trying to parse that out and figure out how large the team needs to be, how to run some things in parallel, which things require research, and which things can we borrow from the 7 years of research that's occurred in the RENA community towards actual production implementations. So throughout the summer and throughout the fall, we'll be making some specialized announcements about what we're planning on doing with RENA and when RENA should come into play. But that's one of the last pieces that we anticipate being put into Cardano. So Ouroboros Hydra, RENA, and Treasury are kind of the next major components of our system. The way we've constructed our Treasury mechanics is that we've kind of abstracted voting to a point where they can be reused for forking the protocol as well. So it's just different parameterization and different thresholds for decision making. So whenever we end up implementing the Treasury into the system, in tandem we'll also implement some form of a forking protocol so that Cardano improvement proposals can be voted on. So that's a 2019 topic, and as we get closer to 2019, the information will continue to get richer, and we'll continue to publish more papers. But I think the long and the short is that we've really gotten a good handle on some of the most difficult problems in the space, and we've been able to put together a pretty tremendous team of people who now fully get how to build the best cryptocurrency. And we've seen just tremendous returns in our engineering philosophy. For example, with the formal wallet specification, we just didn't stop at writing a specification. Paulina, one of our mathematicians, is now actually writing a cock verification of it, and that'll be done very soon. So we're starting to see a lot of people who generally don't work together, like PL experts, cryptographers, game theorists, distributed systems experts, mathematicians, who normally live in their own silos, all coming together towards a common goal and understanding the common collection of problems that we wish to solve, and we're actually able to translate that research fairly quickly into code. There's been a lot of hiccups along the way. Daedalus has been certainly very challenging, and there were some mistakes in the beginning with how we rolled it out and how we designed things that we certainly learned, and it caused usability issues, so we apologize for that. But it looks like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Another thing is we're working on alternative clients. We've been exploring a browser-based client for Cardano, and we're going to see if that's feasible. We've already done 3 proofs of concepts, and we have another presentation internally next week, and our hope is to see if that can bear fruit. We've also been in discussions with people who are constructing mobile clients and discussions with how do we build a lighter version of Daedalus. Some of the challenges are that we have kind of a redesign on the way our wallet works, and we have to wait for that redesign to be finished in terms of implementation and design prior to moving on to things like ledger and lighter weight wallets and mobile wallets and so forth. The good news is we're nearly done with that process. The bad news is we kind of have to wait for that process to finish before we can move on to reasonable experiences for mobile wallets. And this includes major improvements in things like, for example, much faster restoration. It shouldn't take hours to restore a wallet. It should take seconds to minutes. And there's a variety of reasons why it currently takes hours, but our hope is to converge that seconds to minutes. Similarly, we need to redo things like the data layer of the system so we can get much more efficient storage, much more efficient download of the blockchain, and so forth. And these things will come, and we know how to solve them. It's just a matter of engineering our way, writing code to get through it. So anyway, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. We've been working real hard on everything, and it's been a hell of a last 6 months. And we've learned a lot, and we really appreciate the patience. And I look forward to releasing Cardano 1.2. I think you guys are really going to like that, and I think you're going to like 1.3 and 1.4, and we're just going to keep chipping away at things until we get it done. Thank you for being part of the ecosystem. Thanks for the faith and the patience, and I'll talk to you guys soon.